Welcome everyone to Real Talk with My Homies. I'm your host, Jake Wardrip, licensed realtor with Homepage Realty in Louisville, Kentucky. Today we have our first official recurring guest, George Barrett, principal broker of Homepage, is back. Also joined by Andrea Murphy, managing broker at Homepage Realty. Today we're going to take a different tone than the previous episodes. It is going to get a little more serious as we discuss the NAR stuff that's going on in the NAR settlement. What happened? How did it start? Where do we go from here? So we'll get into that a little bit later. Today's podcast is brought to you by Ryan Denigan with Equity Resources Mortgage. Whether you're looking to purchase or refinance a primary residence, second home, or investment property in Kentucky or Indiana, Ryan and his team are ready to assist you and guide you through a quick and smooth mortgage process to ensure you always close on time. You can reach him at 502-759-1406 or email him at rdenigan@callequity.net. Equity Resources Incorporated, NMLS 1579, is an equal opportunity lender. Ryan Denigan, NMLS 1447385, located at 400 Techney Center Drive, Suite 101 in Milford, Ohio, 45150. All right, new segment alert.
Uh-oh.
Jeff, play the sound.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a theme song?
Play the song, Jeff. All right, today is Andrea's birthday.
Yay! Congratulations.
Thank you. Just happy to make it another year.
Yes, another trip around the sun.
Yep.
26 years young. Congratulations.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for that.
All right, so in honor of Andrew's birthday, we also have famous birthdays. Whose birthday is also today? There's not a lot. Sorry, Andrea. Today's not a good day to be a famous person.
I do know of one.
Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy, Jay Pritchett is today. David Letterman, I think we all know who that is.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Clancy, the novelist.
What's a novel?
That's the thing with pages and words and stuff.
Audiobooks.
Yes. For people that are my age, they probably know Tom Clancy more for his video games.
Yeah.
And then Carl Nassib, the first publicly gay NFL player.
Pretty awesome.
Happy birthday to Andrea and the other four. There was a bunch of other people that this website said were more famous than them, and I didn't know any of them. So it wasn't.
I definitely know some of the names on the list.
I made a judgment call, and if I don't know them, I was going to be shocked that you guys knew them. Some of them were like YouTube stars, and no. I made a judgment call.
Speaking of YouTube stars, then.
Yeah, but my birthday's not October. We'll wait till then. I'll bring that up there. All right, so kind of the background of how we got to where we are. We'll get to the meat and potatoes of it.
Oh boy.
The NAR, the topic that everybody's talking about. I think we're going to take kind of a different approach to it, just to not be the same as everything else.
Well, there's new information.
There is new information, I think, and that's being overshadowed by the previous information just because of how jaw-dropping that previous information was. Mm-hmm. But there is some new stuff that has unveiled that I think we're going to chat about today. How we got to this point, March 15th, Burnett versus NAR settled for $418 million. The Department of Justice has not signed off on that settlement, and now there is growing sentiment in the industry that they're not going to sign. They'll throw out the entire settlement. I do believe personally, I think there's other people in the industry as well that are more prognosticators than I am, that the Department of Justice is working towards decoupling the commissions. Mm-hmm. This means buyers will need to pay for their own realtor. Rhonda and Scott Burnett are the Burnetts referenced in Burnett versus NAR. They sold their house for about $250,000, $250,000. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they were uneducated by their realtor at the time. I'm sure he's a nice guy or she's a nice person, but they were uneducated at the time as to why they needed to pay the buyer's agent. What was the benefits to that versus not just selling for sale by owner or not offering any sort of cooperating commission? Mike Ketchmark was their attorney. He was actually a personal injury attorney. He did deal with large settlements, but he was their attorney on this. Made a long story short, this spiraled into a class action lawsuit that ended up putting 500,000 plaintiffs together, and they sued the largest entities, Keller Williams, Home Services, NAR, which I actually found out now is the largest lobbyist group. So that's kind of the gist of how we got to where we are. I know George is very in depth with knowing, the results of the case, the settlement, who's covered, who's not. So George, kind of, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. So I guess you want me to first talk about there's really 4 major points in their settlement that they came out with, which at a certain point, it is, in my opinion, almost, I wouldn't say waste of time, but it can be exhausting, the amount of conversations that I hear both on other YouTube videos or with my realtors, because there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of theories being thrown out with very, very little information. I'm going to give you guys 4 points that's really all we know. And even in those 4 points, there's a lot of vagueness. They say, oh, it's going to come out and all these are going to go under effect in July. I have doubts about that.
Yeah, I think it's all it's good to know that it's all speculation at this point.
Yes.
We don't know what's going to happen in practice. We've got ideas, we've got thoughts.
Right.
But who knows? This could all be for nothing and the whole settlement gets rewritten.
Right. So the most important thing for me as an owner of a brokerage was who was covered in this settlement. We're locally owned here in Louisville, so we don't have a national franchise. And I would argue it's going to be hard to prove that a local broker has somehow been colluding with other brokers or that we have enough market share to matter as far as fixing prices. But we'll push that aside. One thing that I think NAR was a win in the settlement was their settlement payments of $418 million did cover a local brokerage like Homepage.
Okay.
So we are basically covered in the settlement when it comes to the class that was, being the group of 500,000 plaintiffs. We are not able to be sued further if this settlement does get signed off on this issue. So that is nice because you started to see other copycat lawsuits come up in other states. They originally started with kind of the big national chains, and then all of a sudden they started shifting, which you were like on top of that, like, hey, have you seen the latest ones? The latest defendants are people just like you guys, George, or us.
Yes.
So it started going down to the independent brokers. It went down to teams and big agents.
Yes.
Individual
Agents with
agents were
market
named.
share.
Yeah, agents with significant market share. We're going to get sued and left without, it's hard for especially an individual agent to fight a class action lawsuit. So I do think it was a really good thing as far as NAR goes to cover the brokerages that had a principal broker who was a NAR member, which we happen to be one of them. That didn't cover some of the bigger name brands that you guys had heard in the lawsuit. Home Services, Keller Williams, they had their own settlement. Home Services fighting this thing tooth and nail. And it didn't cover any brokerage that sold over $2 billion in 2022. We did not do that. So we fell under the covered segment of things. So that's one. Another interesting thing, especially here locally with, this is kind of inside baseball, but our talk of regionalization of the MLS, which is going to try to combine different MLSs across the state that would allow a little bit larger of a market for agents to be able to see and show homes and stuff. That the proposed structure of that would not have been covered actually under this settlement. So this people and in other markets are actually suing the MLSs that share this data of homes for sale. And a lot of MLSs like ours in Louisville is solely owned by its members that are NAR members, right? I'm actually on the MLS, or used to be on the MLS board, stepped down recently, but and I'll get into some of the issues that came out of that when it comes to kind of antitrust stuff. But our MLS board is currently safe from that. So because we're solely owned by NAR members, by GLAR, we are not part of the unprotected MLSs. Now, if we were to have joined these, it would have been more of a third-party company that other members would be shareholders in this, and it allows for third-party members to be a shareholder. That setup, and there's a lot of those throughout the nation, was not covered in this. So, that's another thing of protection, which is interesting as we talk locally about the regionalization of our MLS. The main thing when it comes, so that's one point. The second point is the compensation needs to come off the MLS now. So And that was a big point within the plaintiff's case, is that, currently, as we're operating, a realtor goes on and looks for a home for a client, or a client sends them a home. And in the MLS, it's called the Cooperating Commissioning Policy. There's a line that is that states what the commission is going to be for the realtors. And that's and I can tell you, in my experience, a varying range. It can be, I've sold a $10,000 house when we were talking about what's your lowest price. I sold some very inexpensive homes that were in mighty disrepair, sold by Fannie Mae or something. It was a government loan that got foreclosed on, and in that situation, there's even a minimum co-op commission that was advertised way back in 2012. I think it was like $1,000, which would have been 10% of that.
Yeah.
So
I know a lot of dirt sales involve higher percentages than what houses do generally, because there's just, you got to get it sold. You got to get some sort of motivation
right
for a buyer to come
right in. And that was the interesting thing, is that in the what we called a clear cooperation policy is what it was, and it was shown on the MLS so that a buyer's agent, before showing a house, before doing work, could, and this sounds crazy, could know how much money that they were going to be paid on work to be done. So the fact that that was somehow demonized because we wanted to know how much we were getting paid to do a job is absurd to me. I mean, how many contractors can you hire and say, hey, come fix my house. After you're done, I'll tell you what you get paid. I mean, that's crazy.
That is crazy.
And every job, there's this is your pay and this is your job. So that now cannot be on the MLS. So we're pulling that off the MLS. And the interesting thing is they didn't really talk about where you could or could not post that. Yeah. So, we've had attorneys tell us, like, there's nothing in law or in this settlement that says a brokerage just couldn't post. Like, we have our own homepage, realty.com. There's a little plug, go for it. But we could go there and we could put all of our listings, and this is how much co-op or commission that we're going to be paying the buyer's agents who represents that.
It feels like, to me, we're going very far backwards in time to like when the MLS was just
a book.
When it was the
LS. Yeah,
book.
exactly.
So,
yeah.
like, is that the route we're going, do you think, with this? Not to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Right. I mean,
where we start posting our own stuff, our own websites, that's not that crazy of an idea. Other people are going to have that idea and probably institute
the way it's written now, it's probably going to go that way, or on social media or something, because it's hard for someone to tell Homepage Realty what we can or cannot do with our personal property or our company property, which we own our website. So what, we're not allowed to post things on that website? That seems absurd. So I think where this could head is that, as opposed to on the MLS, we're just going to check a broker's website to see what the commission is.
And there are alternative options to the GLOR MLS, to participating with NAR.
Yeah.
There is, my state MLS, who has come out and said that they will continue to have that field, that they will continue to allow brokers to put what the cooperating commission is. So I think that there are a lot of different options, and really we're just trying to figure it out as we go.
Well, I think George, you said it at a sales meeting, the first sales meeting after all this happened, where I think everyone that has a homepage license was at, it's probably just, the biggest thing is probably going to force us to talk more.
Yes.
To the listing agent, which
could be
probably should have been doing to begin with.
Which is not bad. Communication, it is good.
Yeah.
We work together to get to the closing table. It's not about fighting each other. So more communication in our profession is very much welcome.
I get excited when an agent calls me about my listing.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, this person
about
means business.
Right.
This person is serious. If they're going to spend their time calling me to try and talk about things, and now we just add another topic to the conversation. Well, and if I remember correctly, I don't think we can offer 0% right now. Don't you have to at least offer $1?
They changed that. That rule during this time. You used to have to at least offer $1, which
I would never offer $1, so it's kind of not.
But also, like, the fact that we're talking about there's a difference between $0 and $1 is, again, absurd. There's just like in my opinion, a complete misunderstanding from really the attorney himself, and he admits in the podcast that you sent me, like, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know how realtors got paid and stuff. So like, oh, great. So now you're going to have, an opinion on something that you're just learning about now. But back to pulling it off the MLS, another kind of absurd, silly thing is on the MLS, you can write seller paid buyer concessions.
Right.
And, traditionally that had gone to buyer closing costs, taxes prepaid, at settled at closing, prorated, all the other things, title insurance, all the other things that can go into actual closing costs. A seller can, of course, pay for that as well. And you can now still advertise. And so within that, you can still use buyer paid or seller paid buyer closing costs to pay for the buyer's agent if we do this decoupling thing. So all of this just seems very strange. And then finally, which is, I'm just trying to get through this quickly. Finally, the big important thing is now, before we show a home as buyer's agents, we will, if this settlement goes through, need to get a buyer agreement signed. And what that buyer agreement has is a clear expectation or communication of what the roles, responsibilities of the buyer's agent is going to be, and also their compensation. And that compensation can be all sorts of different ways. You can say if the seller's not paying, you do this. It could be hourly, it can be flat rates, whatever that may be. That is a really good thing for agents, because there is an inequitable or sometimes unfair, and a lot of times the buyer might not even understand what they're doing, but there's a situation where it is now that you could show a buyer a whole bunch of houses, they go off on their own one day, go to the open house, not quite understand what's going on, or maybe just call on Zillow and, hey, to find here, to set up a showing, click here. And they're like, oh, great, my realtor's on vacation. I don't want to bother him. I'm just going to go see that. If I like it, I'll call him to write an offer. All of a sudden, the agent who has shown that house now has something called, which we don't need to get in the weeds there, procuring cause, meaning I was the reason you guys are going to buy this house. All of a sudden, I'm the one who's owed the commission. And you might have been working with this person for 6 months to a year, which happens a lot. And all of a sudden, you're not going to get paid. This will avoid that. This is how much I'm going to get paid. I'm going to represent you. So that is a good thing when it comes to this thing. And then finally, NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. So those are the 4 main points. And now that I've explained that, I guess we can now kind of talk about some of the details of it.
So what, moving forward, you're more on the front lines than George with the realtors.
Yeah.
What are the changes that are we going to see on a daily basis? What are the changes and this, again, assuming that the settlement goes through as it's written, and that we're not going to go back and reinvent the whole thing. What are the biggest changes that we're going to see?
For the local agent, the boots on the ground, I think we are really going to see a lot more. I think professionalism is going to be raised a lot, and which it needs to be in this industry. I believe that effectively communicating your value to your client and discussing with them the liability, the things that happen, because, consumers don't buy and sell real estate every single day. It is really the agent's job to have the community roots to be able to effectively get that closing to close.
And even that statement almost offends me. And I get where, no, let me explain. I'm
like, okay.
No, I get,
right, here we go.
I get exactly.
20 minutes in.
I get exactly what you're saying. Right. And you are right. Professionalism needs to happen. But what that statement assumes is that realtors were acting unprofessional. Yes, there were people acting unprofessional, but I can name some very professional realtors that this doesn't change how they were doing business in the first place. They were explaining, they were doing this. And
I agree.
You know what I mean? I know you agree. That's what I'm saying. It's absurd that you have to say oh, we're going to, because I think for some reason, and just like a lot of industries, there's a couple of bad apples that don't do their job right. And I'm sure there's attorneys, if we're talking about a class action lawsuit, I'm sure there's attorneys who kind of don't explain things and don't do their job. And there's, of course, realtors who don't do their job right. But there is also some really, really professional realtors that have been doing this and above and beyond what this is going to force us to do from the whole beginning. But yes, you are correct. It's going to be a standard. The bar, the lowest bar will definitely be raised.
Yes.
I think for some of those top agents, like you just said, nothing's going to change for them. If anything, they're going to be more successful because the lower rung in professionalism, they're not going to have any business. They're going to be forced out whether they want to be forced out or not. And those houses still have to be sold. So they may only do 1, 2, 3 deals a year. Well, now those 1, 2, 3 deals a year are exponentially increased because of the amount of agents, and everyone at the top is now getting their business.
The agents that I work with on a daily basis, like you said, the front lines, those are good, hard-working agents that provide a service. They are well worth their weight in gold. And I do feel that there are some agents that are going to essentially rise to the top. The ones that are already at the top are going to remain there. And the ones who are not good are going to go away. And they should probably hand in their license. And George is going to lose it.
I'm laughing again because I'm going to say I disagree with you two one more time.
That's fine.
And again, respectfully so, what you're saying, what both of you guys are saying are correct. However, there is a possibility that, and it's a non-zero chance that it could be the exact opposite of what you guys are talking about. Right?
Absolutely.
So
nothing's in stone.
if you have, and let me play out the scenario, if you have a very professional realtor who understands their value, and now let's say there's a landscape where buyers have to actually pay for their professional high-end representation, they might not have that cash for it. So they're going to look like, oh man, can I really afford this person? There's going to be someone who's just entering the market that has significantly less experience, that now a brokerage cannot afford to pay trainers and give all the support and stuff to that agent. There's no, real support behind that agent. They could be, I don't want to say desperate, but they could be trying to build their own career. And will they take $1,000 in their head, more than $0 and never get it? I think there'll be a couple people try to be like, hey, you can use me as a realtor and I'm only going to charge $1,000. I'm not going to charge, what could amount to be on a $250,000 house, $7,500. And an undereducated or about the process buyer could be like, I'm going to save $6,000 and I'm going to choose this realtor who's only offering me $1,000, right? And we can go down the road of how dangerous that could be if you're being represented. If the consumer's being represented by an underqualified realtor. But what that could happen then is that now all of a sudden your top agents are no longer able to do the work that they deserve to do and get paid the amount that they deserve to do. So all these agents who may be needing the money, let's say, are cutting their fees so low that it kind of pushes out some of the more experienced agents. You know what I mean? So that's one scenario. And your scenario is right too. So let's play that scenario out. Let's say the agents who are inexperienced and probably need to have an adjustment of either education or what they need to do or a career change. Let's say they do get pushed out. But on the same side, buyer agency commissions go down. So now you're telling a top agent like, hey, you're still going to make the same amount of money because there's going to be so many more available. You're going to have a larger market share.
Yeah.
But all I'm telling you is you're going to make the same amount of money by working more. So it's like, that's not 100% a great scenario. So now we're asking our top producing agents to do 10 houses under contract all of a sudden. Like, do you think that agent's going to have time to spend that much if they literally have to do 25, 30, 50% more work to make the same amount of money? There's only so many hours in the day. So
I think too, and this just goes to the world that we live in. When there's drastic change like that, there's new opportunities. And with new opportunities comes the ability to, if you're a top producing agent, you've got expendable income that you can put towards processes. Hire an admin. I've done that myself. I know you've got one. Hire an admin. We have all of our stuff in-house. So plug for Homepage Realty. If you're an agent listening to this, we've got a lot of resources that not a lot of other agencies have that can free up some of your time and make it so that you can be more productive, be more successful, and your time is very valuable already. So, long story short to say, I think there's going to be a lot of new technology, a lot of new stuff that comes into the market that we don't even know.
Disruptive.
It's about as disruptive as you could be.
It's definitely disruptive, and I really, really think, George, in your scenario, and Jake, and what we were talking about, I think no matter what, the consumer is losing. is what I truly believe.
It feels like the goal of the settlement was to protect the consumer, give them more transparency as a consumer, and all we've done is just put another curtain down between the consumer and the process.
The MLS was the last, not the last, but a very clear cooperation agreement, evened out the playing field for buyers in one segment of the market versus buyers in another segment of the market. Because Keeping Current Matters just came out with a survey that said that people really want to be represented. There are consumers out there who can buy and sell real estate every single day. They don't necessarily need an agent, but for the average consumer, you only move maybe 3 or 4 times in your life. And it's just, it seems like a complicated transaction, and that's why people want the representation.
I also think that to the outside, sometimes it seems like a simple process. And that's why they're like, realtors get paid too much for what they do. Yeah. They just put a sign in the yard. They just drive around the door.
They make us the scapegoat. I have been so extremely offended by some of the headlines that have come out and are just bashing people that I work with every single day who care about their clients, who will put the needs of their clients in front of their own. And now they're being made out to be horrible people because of the headlines. And I just think it is up to us to change that narrative.
I think a big underlying thing too is we as licensed professionals can make problems disappear before they become a problem. Yeah. The better you are, you know, do you want me to make these, do you want me to just turn a blind eye and let these problems occur and then I can fix them and then you can see my worth? Or do you just want me to make them disappear on the front end so that you can get a full 8 hours of sleep at night?
So this happened this morning as the managing broker, like you said, I'm on the front lines. An agent emails me and says, hey, I have a buyer client and on the other side is a for sale by owner. There's an issue in the transaction and, you know, now the seller needs to know what to do. And my response is they have to contact an attorney. We can't advise them. So something
you have a fiduciary duty not to. You have to protect your client.
Yes. So now what is a simple disagreement is going to incur more fees for the seller because they're going to have to pay an attorney to get advice. Either way, you're paying someone to advise you if you don't know.
So I think a good point I saw, not to cut you off,
You did cut me off, so that's okay.
My apologies. But to piggyback off of what she said, I was watching a video talking about everything that's going on. It was 2 people that work in title. Yep. And a lot of people now are saying, well, I'm just going to hire an attorney to write a contract for me to buy a property. The biggest takeaway I got from watching that video was the title attorneys themselves that have the ability, the knowledge to write a contract and clearly navigate the process, they hire realtors.
Yeah, all the time.
So the person that you're going, Johnny Consumer, who is going to hire a real estate attorney to write a contract for $1,000, just call it that. Yes, you're going to save a bunch of money, but that person that you're having write the contract alone is also going to hire a licensed professional to do their own stuff because they understand the value. They trust that process is in better hands when there's a realtor involved.
So why do you think that is? I feel like I have an answer. In education?
Education.
Okay.
I think there is, unfortunately, not to talk down on some of my peers, but I think there is a lot of realtors in our industry that do not properly convey what value they're bringing to the table.
See, I think it's negotiation. It is negotiating because people don't want to talk about their own personal money. They really don't. That's why, as an industry, we didn't have the exclusive buyer agency agreements signed. But we all need to be adults. Yeah. We need to discuss the money in certain aspects. But for a local licensed agent, we can negotiate that and get the very best deal for a client. And I think that's why title attorneys will still hire agents.
Oh, 100%. They've got they're more than capable to do the job on their own.
Yes.
If everything goes out according to plan. But a good realtor is kind of like insurance.
Right.
You don't need it till you need it.
Exactly.
Then you'd rather have it.
So glad you said that. If you've been listening to me, you just seal my mind. That's You're intelligent.
Is that a Georgism?
You're an intelligent human. Yeah.
Is that a new term?
Okay.
Georgism?
So,
it is now.
So Jake, I know.
Off for trademark.
I know you. You spent some time putting this great outline for the show. You sent us podcasts to listen to. I know you have a plan. So, if we're getting down to what we're talking about, the value of a realtor, I'm about to totally throw that out and just
go for
down
it.
a rabbit
This was a very rough draft of what to talk about because I knew that there was a chance we'd go off on a tangent.
We're tangent.
And I wanted to allow us to do that.
All right.
Let's do it.
Yes.
Play the tangent warning music.
Tangent sound.
Okay, so let me go down on a tangent. So what we are talking about, and I've got a lot of notes about this. I'm going to try to be respectful of both of you guys, so I'm only going to do one point. I'll let you guys respond, or else it's going to be a 2-hour podcast. So what we're talking about here a little bit is the true value of a realtor in general, or of a buyer's agent specifically.
Yeah.
So we come from the liability side of things. We have over 200 agents at Homepage Realty. Of those 200 agents, we have 3 peer advisors that are agents of Homepage, which are kind of like your SOS. Call them at any time. Every realtor has that. We have 3 or 4 classes every single week on how to do your job. We have mentors that train the brand new agents, that hold their hands, make sure that process is done right. What I'm trying to say is we put a lot of money, time, and effort behind the education of our realtors, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that education has to do with avoiding liability, avoiding the issues before they come up, like you said. Even so, even after having said all of that, Andrea, probably deals with an issue where someone is at least threatening a lawsuit 1 out of every 10 deals, maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
At worst,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So 1 out of every 10 deals. 1 out of every 20 deals probably go to mediation.
They do.
And here's the thing about mediation, about lawsuits and everything. No one is going to mediation over even a $10,000 settlement that they're seeking. Usually it starts at $50,000, $100,000.
Yeah.
I've seen $1 million, right? I've been sued as the principal broker for $1 million in an absurd lawsuit that should have been avoided from the very beginning, and our agent did everything right, but someone's still going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so let's say a realtor should have gotten paid if we did a percentage, or might have gotten paid $5,000 to represent a buyer, $5,000 to represent a seller, and now we're talking about let's cut out buyer, or let's cut them down to only $1,000. Let's try to save $4,000 or $5,000 on the transaction by cutting a realtor's pay. Because, this is collusion. Well, now all of a sudden you save $4,000 and you have a 10 to 5% chance of getting sued for $100,000 because you wanted to save $4,000. That's what you mean by insurance, right? Like, no one thinks it's going to happen to them until it happens to them.
Exactly. I have participated in mediations where the opposing counsel walks in. They give a number, and I ask, well, how did you get to that number? And they say, well, we just feel like it's what we're owed. And it's an astronomical number. It's just a place to start. And you talk about someone wanting to save $4,000. You're going to spend $4,000 just to get to mediation, to defend a lawsuit. And right now, it's always been anyone can sue anybody at any time for anything. And it is now with the lack of inventory, the high prices, the amount of lawsuits that we deal with are just, it's 1 in every 20.
Yeah.
So I feel like what we need, or what agents need, is really, in this time of crisis, you need a good, strong brokers that understand what is going on in the market, the disruption that is happening, and how we can support our agents getting through that, because the lawsuit side of it is a whole separate side.
And that's the high risk side. And
high risk.
Let's talk about the lawsuit process in general, right?
Right.
Part of NAR. In my opinion, one of the biggest things that the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors offers as far as value goes to our consumers is the process of mediation and arbitration, right?
Yes.
So if we didn't have NAR, if we didn't have GLAR, which honestly it sounds like that's what they want. They don't want us at all. So if you're representing yourself and you don't have an agreement under the Association of Realtors for mediation arbitration, you are, if you get sued, you are going to court. At minimum, you're going to pay $10,000, maybe $15,000 in just attorney fees.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pay court costs. And you're going to have to wait 6 months if you're lucky for it to be settled, more like a year plus for you to go through the court system. Meanwhile, you're like, I still can't buy a house because I'm dealing with this lawsuit situation. In mediation arbitration, that whole process can be a couple of thousand, maybe $4,000 if you really want to have your own lawyer representation, and could happen in 2 months, and then you're off in a much less expensive process in general before we talk about not even going through that process because you had a good realtor. So it seems as if a consumer, or not even a consumer, the opposition against us doesn't even want to try to understand that value that we are providing them, far more than just what we're talking about, being able to negotiate repairs and prices and stuff. And let me tell you, that's a whole lot of value too.
I absolutely agree with that. Whether you were right or wrong in the transaction, it costs money to defend a lawsuit. It really does. There are fees for depositions. I've participated in mediations where we have tried to get settled before it went to a trial because the other side was so upset about something that really was, in my opinion, trivial. But it all worked out, and it didn't take a year. And that's because we had the mediation arbitration clause. I have known brokers that have received lawsuits that have been filed in court, and it's a simple file a motion, let's go to mediation, let's work it out, and let's everyone be done with it.
And they had access to someone like you who has a whole lot of experience, who has intelligence, who has the understanding and skill to negotiate. You understand the contract.
Yep.
That buyer didn't realize they paid for that as well to have you. They also paid for our E&O insurance policy. If something went wrong, there is an E&O insurance that can be stepped in to help limit those damages and stuff. And it's just like, unfortunately, that message is so hard to convince someone, yet everyone's okay paying their insurance on their home. It's like, $10,000 policy, sure. But I don't want to pay my realtor $10,000 for buying this.
Yeah.
We need an easy sports analogy to convey that, like they did in the trial.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that analogy would be, but I absolutely think that agents are going to do a much better job of communicating their value. And I know at Homepage, we have always strived to do that. And we set the bar high for the industry locally. And I'm proud of that.
I'll be interested to see how the conversations go shortly after that, because now, I don't require buyer agreements when I'm showing a house. Because most of the time it's either someone I know or a friend of a friend. So the loyalty is somewhat already entrenched into that relationship that we have. So I'm curious to know, what kind of conversations are going to come out of this? Because if they don't want to sign, they're like, well, I just met you. I don't really want to sign a form that's going to lock me in. Where does that conversation go? Because as a realtor, do we have it on the phone? Because now that's just another hoop that they may need to jump through, and I'll wait. And well, if you call someone else, you're going to have the same conversation with them.
We have to.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a must. So how...
Does anyone hire an attorney over the phone?
No.
There's always the consultation. We have used the analogy of a plumber. You have the plumber out to the house. You have a look at the problem. And I believe that the conversation is going to take place. It must take place during that buyer consultation. What the commission structure is, how much an agent is going to make is up to the individual. And I think we all have some ideas of how our landscape is going to look. But I think we're all just working through it.
Yeah. I think we're just going to have, a lot of us, myself included, are going to have conversations that we've never had before.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And it should be easy if I know them. But if I get a lead from Zillow, or if I get a lead from friend of a friend of a friend, or somebody sees the podcast and they're, hey, I want to work with.
Happens every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, all the time. I have picked up a couple actually, which has been really cool. But how does that conversation transpire? Is it without trying to sound too much like a salesman to get people locked in? I think there's going to take some training.
I think we just had some
education
of
on
it.
that.
Yeah. And that scenario you said, when the buyer's like, I don't want to sign that, it's like, all right, well, I can't show you a house then. Good luck. Good luck.
It's up to the agent.
Well, for young and hungry agents, that won't sit well with them.
Yeah.
Knowing that, like, hey, I've sold maybe 4 houses in my life. I'm new and upcoming. I got these people who want to look at a house, but they don't want to sign the buyer's agreement. Like, oh, maybe I can roll the dice with them and hope for the best. And it's like, can't really do that. You got to get it signed. So I think that's where the biggest challenge is going to be, is a lot of the newer agents that don't want to. It's for some, it's easy to just say, no, I can't show you the house. Sorry, until we do that.
Well,
but for others, it's not.
And that's why you need good brokers who can provide that training.
For the new agent, that's a great point.
Yes, that is exactly what an agent, in my opinion, pays a broker to help them out when they get in a pickle. When something is going on, there is a conflict that needs to be taken care of. So in the beginning, yes, we have mentors, we have PAs, we have excellent agents at Homepage who can help the new agent with that verbiage. And then you've got the good brokers that know how to help in those scenarios. Yeah. That's the true value, in my opinion.
And we're brokers, so of course we're going to say that. But but also that's baked into the commission that sellers are paying.
Yes.
They don't even realize how much goes into. You got a whole company behind that listing agent.
Yeah.
And for some reason, in this case, it's like we paid too much.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go down that we paid too much, but I'll wait. Well, I know you do have some direction.
Yeah, I think, and I'll cap this off because we got a lot of questions that agents have asked me. I'd like to get to those before we turn off. But I think at the end of the day, even some of the best agents in the world, we'll do full circle and go back to UK basketball and talk about John Calipari. He's going to Arkansas.
Really, that happened?
Yeah. Is he one of the best? Is he one of the best coaches of all time? Yes. Has he gotten a little lazy? Yes. Were they still winning games? Yes. Was he still successful? Yes.
Debatable, but
well, yeah. But
matters what time of year.
In the grand scheme of things.
Did they get past the first round in the tournament?
All right, we're moving on.
Okay.
But he's going to be down in Arkansas now with a new leash on life. And I think you're going to see some of the top agents that maybe have taken a slight step back, and this is just a well-oiled machine now. This is how I work. This is how I operate. I'm just, showing houses, writing contracts, doing everything. This is kind of like a big reset for them. Like, okay, how am I operating? Do I need to go back, back to the basics is a thing. Do I need to go back to the basics and relearn how to do some of this stuff and be even better than I am now? And he's going to go down to Arkansas. He's going to crush it. Just like he would have, if he had stayed at Kentucky and tried. So, I think that's a fair analogy, is that even the best agents, not saying that they're lazy. I'm not saying that they're skipping stuff or they're cutting corners, but just kind of re-upping on a new, like, okay, let's make sure I get all my I's dotted and all my T's crossed before I start moving forward.
It's important to know, there are different business models out there when we look at brokerages. You can hire the limited service, or you can hire someone who is full service, like we are at Homepage. Homepage.com. I got to give a plug, just like you two did. So,
if you really want to get specific, it's jakewardrip.homepage.
There we go.
See what he's doing.
I have to put a link in the comment.
Yeah. All right. So I've got some questions here, and then we'll go ahead and turn this off. First question. I know we've already answered this, but I still want to ask it. Can buyers ask for seller-paid closing costs to cover their commissions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that this will happen in the timeline laid out?
No.
When do you think this will unfold? Predictions. This is predictions.
After the election.
I have 2 separate predictions. I have it will never unfold and we'll go back to normal if we have, depending on the election, like you said. I mean, the DOJ I think the DOJ is going to come in and say we don't agree to this, like you said.
Oh, I think so.
And I think that delays us even longer. And the difference between July and November, as far as court cases, settlements go, I imagine is very short. So if this goes past November and there is a change in power, that new administration is probably going to look at this and might have a different opinion on how this goes. It might get completely thrown out yet again because past administrations have signed off and agreed to the cooperation policy. This could be much ado about nothing if things play out a certain way, which I think there's a non-zero chance that happens. Maybe a 25% chance, maybe a 10% chance, 25% chance on this actually goes down in July. And I think it's most likely, or at least 50% chance, going to be somewhere between now and November.
You know, the DOJ, yes, I'm not saying they're a bad organization. They are to protect the consumer. But if we are just looking at the facts, there have been less mergers and acquisitions of large companies. The DOJ is currently suing Apple. Everyone knows who Apple is. The DOJ is just against big companies doing things, and NAR is the largest trade organization. And if we really want to boil it down to some numbers, real estate makes up a large part of our GDP, gross domestic product. Thank you.
GDP.
Yeah, GDP. There we go.
Yep.
And what is that going to do to our economy on a grand scale? And that's probably a whole separate conversation. But those are some facts about the DOJ.
Yeah. If you're looking to buy, would waiting for these changes be in your best interest?
Absolutely not.
No, I agree. I think it's best to go through the process as we have set up. We've been doing this business similar to this way, not always this way, for 100 plus years. And by the way, it used to not have a lot of buyer's agents. It used to be, and this whole thing of like, sellers don't want to pay the buyer's agent. Buyers don't want to have to pay for their own agent. What used to happen is a lot of times the buyer would show up unrepresented, and then the seller is in a dual, or the listing agent's in a dual agency situation. The seller might be their high school buddy. So how are you going to say that this person is going to remain completely neutral when there's a really good personal relationship on one side of the deal? You don't want your own representation. So I would say it's probably best if you're on the fence to go ahead and buy. Call Jake, call Andrea. They're happy to represent you.
We'll call George now. We found out before the podcast that he got back on the saddle. Diapers aren't cheap.
That's right.
All right. How would billing by the hour in lieu of commissions be good or bad?
I'm so glad you asked this question because I did a whole lot of work.
All right.
He's ready.
Would you like to start, or can I?
He sounds really prepared. So
Can I waste 10 hours?
I think her answer is going to be shorter if you've got notes.
I think it's an answer of both. I really do. I think it's going to be bad because agents, or, we're looking at the income, as you said yesterday, commission compression, things like that. Agents, so I think it's going to be bad in that sense. And then I think it's going to be good for the type of consumer that, hey, I only want you to show me the house. That's it. I only want you to do the paperwork. I take, and let me just say this real quick. That standard that they've been saying, let me tell you how many phone calls I get from agents. My client is in this particular situation. This is what they have going on. This is how I would like to help them. Do you think this is the best idea for my business? And I am always supportive of that. So yes, my answer is short. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's bad. So tell us.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the case that started all this, the Burnett case. So they were patient zero. Yes, patient zero. They were sellers, right? And they had a seller. They were listing their house for $250,000. They agreed to. By the way, they agreed to in a contract to pay a 6% listing, or a 6% commission to the listing brokerage.
And they had the option for other commissions on there.
Yes.
This realtor that did the listing said,
that's the weird
I have, I've never operated like this, but it's his business, let him run it the way he wants.
Yeah.
He's got different options and different services provided at those
which he's
options.
allowed,
100% allowed to do.
Yeah.
So she picked the cheapest one, like most consumers would.
Yeah. And by the way, didn't have to hire that person.
No.
Correct.
Could have said, no, I can't afford to go hire.
Could have gotten someone else who would have done it, but to simply say, this is what I had to pay. No, you didn't. Yes. Consumer, accept responsibility for your role in the transaction of selling your largest financial instrument.
Yeah.
Sorry, George. Go on.
And we love our clients, by the way.
We do.
Before we go down that thing.
We do.
I'm joking.
Maybe not. Yes, we do love them all.
All right, so let's do the math on this. So in the way that it was described in the trial and had been described in the news is like, oh, the seller had to pay the buyer's agent commission. Yeah. That's not even true. No. The buyer could have come unrepresented or say, I'm going to have an attorney do this. And guess what? They've already agreed to, in this case, a 6% listing. In this case, the listing agent, I don't know the details of the contract, but most likely, if there was no buyer representation on that side, the listing agent could either represent the buyer and the seller or just represent the seller, and that whole 6% commission is going to the listing agent anyway. So you're not really paying the buyer's agent, you're paying the listing company a 6%, and one of our marketing tools that we are going to use is we're going to post on the MLS, and maybe a buyer's agent is going to bring a buyer, and we would compensate that as legitimately a marketing cost for selling your home, in this case, for 3% to the buyer side of things. So let's just go down the route of saying, I'm going to list it myself, or 6% is too much money. Why am I paying 6%? I'm going through developing a website for another project that I'm doing, right? So I've been talking to web developers. You cannot develop a website of any significance for less than $10,000. You just can't. If we're talking about a website to what the MLS can do, your number one marketing tool as a seller, that website would cost millions of dollars. Something that is able to, through an IDX feed in real time, syndicate your listing to Zillow, to Trulia, to Homes.com. The exposure that website can provide the seller is a very expensive thing. And they get to plug into that thing. They don't have to pay for the development of themselves by selling an owner. They get to plug into that thing for, in this case, 6%. In other cases, it's different all the time, by the way. You can hire people for $500 to throw it up on the MLS. It is not anywhere close to a
business models out there.
Right. So just the website of it would be incredibly expensive. Secondarily, you have all of these people trying to sell your house. Like, how is that not? That's a marketing tool. We're using this as a marketing tool. Okay, so put that aside even. Let's say the 3% that you would have to pay in this case, that let's say the buyer paid their 3% in this case, because it's a 6% listing. I'm not saying 3% is what you have to pay as a buyer, but in this case, the buyer's agent got 3%. And if we want to decouple it, the DOJ wants the buyer to pay for that. Oh, 3%, that sounds really expensive. 3% and $250,000 listing is $7,500. Let's just go through. At homepage, we have a guide to purchasing your home.
Seen that a few times.
It gives you step-by-step process. Get this on camera. Step-by-step process of what buying your home is going to go. This is a 2-pager, as we can tell, and the font is not huge. So there's obviously a lot of steps involved. There's a little summary of your steps back here.
And there's images on the back to simplify the process.
So let's go through what that realtor is going to do for you as a buyer. And this is a pretty minimum job, to be honest with you, of what you could expect. You got a consultation up front that probably takes about 3 hours. You're with the client, you're doing an hour of prep, explaining how it's going to go. Then you're going to set up their search online. There's another 2 hours. You're going to go through a pre-approval process, selecting the right loan officer for you, discussing with the loan officer and the realtor what the payments are going to look like, what the terms of the loan is going to be, so the realtor can discuss that with the listing agent. There's an hour there. You got showings. The average buyer sees at very least 10 homes before they buy the house. The average. Some are lucky the first one Others, you could be working with a buyer for a year. So let's just take the average. And we're excluding the times in 2020 where there was multiple offers everywhere and you're writing 14 offers before you get
those were unicorn years.
Those are unicorn years. But in average,
you don't even have to go over the contract anymore with your client. They know about as much of it as you do.
Yeah. By the time they actually get
The amount of times you've gone over it.
Yeah. So you've got 10 showings, an average of 2 hours per showing for prep, drive, showing, recap, and all that. There's another 20 hours. Ongoing market search throughout the process. You know, you're spending, I don't know, an hour a day to help search for your client. There's 7 hours per week times about 4 weeks before you find a house. You know, there's a lot of hours there, right there. So I should do the math. 28 hours right there.
So a lot of time.
We're a lot of time. I'm halfway through. Obviously, I can tell you guys are like, wrap it up, George. I came up.
Where's the bottom line?
Yeah. Get to the bottom line.
Net.
Net is in a very conservative approach, I estimated about 100 hours. I actually wrote this down. I came up with 102 hours. That's conservative. It's probably more. 100 hours that your realtor is going to spend working you through the process, which could take over, most of the time, is going to take 3 months at least. If we paid that realtor $75 an hour, which in my opinion is underpaying a professional. How much do you pay your attorney? How much do you pay your accountant? How much do you pay your professional to do it?
Honestly, count enough. He's great.
I pay the person that cuts and colors my hair more.
Yeah, so let's say
that's
a good point.
Get a 30-minute haircut.
Yes.
Pay $35.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I pay a lot more than that because I want the best.
And that's why you're wearing a hat too.
Yes.
I get a buzz cut.
Yeah.
Shout out to my stylist.
Yes.
So, all right. So let's say you even pay them $100 an hour, which I don't think is absurd. I think it's underpaid for some of the quality realtors out there. But let's say $100 an hour times 102 hours. That's $10,200 that you would have paid. And 3% of $250,000 is less than that. So if we're going to go to start underpaying realtors at $100 an hour, and by the way, that had to come out of cash from the buyer, they're going to end up paying more money if they go by an hourly basis on a fair market wage for what that entails than they would in the current system anyways. So how is this helping our consumers? It makes no sense.
It does not help them
Your
at all.
math also works under the assumption that we get the house in a month and we get the first house we try.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's why he excluded the unicorn years
Yeah.
when we wrote 14 offers.
We didn't talk about liability avoided. We didn't talk about paying the brokerage that gives us support for the education.
Right.
We didn't talk about a lot of things. This is just the
bare bones.
the bare bones of it. And we're already at $10,000.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we got to cut this off. It's been an hour.
Yeah.
This has been very, very good. There's still so much more that we could talk about. There's still so much more that we don't know. And I think, to end it all with a preface of this is all still speculation.
I think that's a really good point.
It is, we can think and try and act and make adjustments, pivot the way we need to, but nothing's official until the DOJ signs it. Nothing's official until it actually takes place. And I think there's a lot of, I think there's more questions than answers right now at this time. Any parting words?
Yes, here's something I will say about real estate agents. They are incredibly resilient, strong, hardworking entrepreneurs operating micro businesses. When COVID happened and everyone had to go home, we pivoted as an organization and thrived. And we will do it again and again, no matter how many times our marketplace is disrupted by the DOJ, the politics, whatever it is. Those are my parting words. Agents are resilient, and I believe in our agents.
Any parting words of wisdom?
I'm glad you said positive. And I've been positive and negative in my...
You're going to go negative. You should have cut me off. And started talking.
I don't want to go too negative, but parts of this really disappoint me. I feel attacked. Wall Street Journal called us the cartel. It saddens me the way that the news is portraying this, and it's just simply not true. And I hate to end on a negative. So what I will say though is your realtor, if you hire a homepage agent, of course, is a good person. They're hardworking people. Yes. I personally, as a broker, have never called another broker or another agent and said, hey, let's keep it at X percentage and make sure we can fix this. It's never happened.
Never. Never happened.
No, there's no smoky back room. It's never happened. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. And I think we'll probably need to do another episode on this once we see more unfold. Yeah. I think once we see more unfold, we'll be able to have a better idea of what we need to do and where we need to be as an industry, and for the two of you as a company as well. So I appreciate both your times. George, welcome back for episode number 2.
Thank you.
Andrea, we'll get a one-on-one with you and dive deeper into you and who you are, where you came from.
Oh, that sounds fun.
As an individual. So I think that'll be fun for some of the other agents and the brokers to see as well.
Absolutely.
The woman behind the glasses.
That's right. I will say a lot of real estate agents are women. They really are. You're going to say a bunch of women are the drug cartel? I don't believe it. So I look forward to the next time that we can get together.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.